Hello again, everyone, and welcome back to Reddit Aliens. I am John, and as always, thank you so much for being here. Good serious topic for you today. Let's go. Redditors who used to not believe in the supernatural, what experience changed your mind? Please remember to like, share, and subscribe. I was in a relationship, and we started hanging out with this married couple. They moved from an apartment to a house, and a couple of months in, they were calling more often to go out. And if one got off before the other, that one would want to be out with us until the other came home. A couple of months went by, and they both were always tired and on edge. We assumed they were having relationship or money troubles. One night, we were out and just decided to ask. They were pretty reluctant to say anything, but started talking about how they'd been having weird experiences in the house. Initially, it started with their dogs. They would only cower in the corner of one room and freak out if they tried to bring them into the living room. They started leaving them outside, and the dogs just stared at the house and barked constantly, so that they were getting complaints from the neighbors. They had to take them to her parents to stay. They would hear stuff, things that sounded like someone running down the hallway when they were the only ones there, and in the same room. Doors opening and closing. Things moved about, the usual. Then, separately, they both saw someone standing behind them in the reflection of the TV. One saw an old man and the other saw a girl. One day, when the woman was ironing, the blinds bent down like someone was looking out the window and then went back up. The guy was home alone one day and mentioned to his wife he was going to make a sandwich on the phone. He heard noises in the kitchen and went in, and all the sandwich stuff was on the counter. They were embarrassed because they weren't the type to believe in that stuff, but they were also scared shitless. This is why they were going out so much and avoided being home alone. My SO and I went over one day to wait with them until she got off work. We were hanging out and talking, and we could hear things being moved in the kitchen, glasses clanking together, doors opening and shutting. We would go silent and then start talking louder, but it kept getting more frequent and louder, and he was like, "Let's just meet her at a restaurant." "Yeah, no problem." They broke their lease. He was starting to act strangely in his sleep, and maybe it was just the stress, but it made it worse. We went to help them pack and move, and we started early, and the whole mood was just tense and weird, despite us playing music and trying to keep things light. And by late afternoon, it was like we knew we were working on a deadline, tossing shit in boxes, throwing stuff in vehicles. They didn't want to be there after dark, and the feeling was contagious. At twilight, we were done, and all of us were practically running to the vehicles. They got in one, we got in the other, and my SO and I were backing out of the driveway. There was a big bay window in the front of the house. I looked at the window and he said, "Do you see?" I said, "Just effing go. Now." We drove to their apartment, and when we were all inside, my SO asked again to everyone, "Did you see a little," I interrupted, "girl?" The guy finished. "In a white dress?" the girl asked. We all nodded. Then she said, "I was hoping I imagined it. Damn." Then we all drank beer. Sorry, I know it's long, but true. You know, you read all these stories and you keep an open mind. I believe you because you have no reason to make it up, right? But I don't know. What do you guys think? Do you believe? Skeptical? Possible? I don't know. I'm not sure it's supernatural is the word for it, but I definitely can't explain it. I've posted it once before, so I'll just copy and paste it. A friend and I were driving up a mountain road to a camping site to join a bunch of our other friends at night. We were sure we were on the right road and we knew how long the drive should be, but the drive just seemed to be taking forever. So long that we started to question if we'd somehow gotten turned around. We both started feeling uneasy, though at first neither of us voiced this to the other. We kept passing owls in the trees along the side of the road. I mean, dozens and dozens of owls. I've spent a lot of time in the mountains, and I'd think it was lucky to see one, but we saw dozens, all in the trees on the side of the road, staring at us. When my friend had to stop to take a piss, both of us pretty much blurted out how unsettled we were, and how this didn't feel right at all, and neither of us wanted him stepping away from the vehicle. He stopped as fast as he could and pretty much pissed right out of the door with the vehicle running and the lights on, took off again like it was some sort of race. Then we got there, everyone wondered how we were so late. We did too. We told my father about it later, and he commented on how supposedly alien abductees often remember seeing owls. I swear to the end of my days that I don't remember a single break in my consciousness on that trip. But I have no idea how it took us so long, and can't describe just how wrong the feel of everything was. I've had bears walk by 20 feet in front of me, elk wake me up brushing past my tent in the middle of the night, but felt nothing like that before or since. I've always enjoyed the thought of ghosts and stuff, but never really believed firmly. I liked it just enough that it was entertaining but not scary. So a friend of mine had this long-standing ghost story of the bunny man at her dad's house, and maybe 8-foot-tall shadow-like with bunny ears or horns that she saw often in the woods by her dad's house as a child, and spoke enough about that her dad and sister teased her about it in adulthood. Her parents were separated, so she lived with her mom after the age of 10, and wasn't at her dad's house often enough for this ghost story to really persist. A few incidents at sleepovers, but nothing big. When we were nearly 20 years old, we both moved back in with our parents to save some money and pay some bills. She and her mom didn't get along, so her dad gladly invited her to live with him in his house by the woods. She gladly accepted. Of course, her decision to move in brought up the bunny man, which we had a laugh about and moved on. I helped her move her stuff because I owned a big car, and why not? Immediately, sketchy things started to happen while we were moving in stuff. We would put things in places, and 10 minutes later they would be somewhere else. At some point, she put her purse inside while we were moving furniture, and we lost it. We found it in my car, but whatever, explainable. But the more it happened, the more we began to kind of freak out. As we moved the last load of the night out of my car, it was dark. The outside lights, motion detected, flickered on and off while we were inside. We went back to my car, unsettled and ready to go back home and be done packing for the day. We get in. We turn on the lights. On my windshield, as plain as day, is a huge elongated handprint, as an angle as though someone was on top of my car when they pressed it. I can't stress to you how alone we were at the house. It's literally in the woods, far from anything. Her dad wasn't even home. He's a trucker and was gone for a few weeks while we moved her in. We hadn't put that handprint there. Both of us froze, unable to speak. After a moment, I reached up and touched it. It came off. It was inside the windshield. I wiped it away and started to drive off. Pretty spooked, but my friend started to straight up cry. She's a pretty stoic person. I think I've seen her cry maybe twice, and this is one of those times. She only lived there about 4 months in between houses, but it was a weird few months. If we started talking about the bunny man too long, something would happen. Lights would go off or turn on. Things would fall off shelves. We would hear tapping on windows. If we were having a fire in the yard, the fire would spark and pop. We never felt settled there. I'm amazed she slept there because the few nights I stayed in the guest bedroom, it was so hard to sleep. Just an overarching feeling of dread. Very quiet part of the woods too. Not a lot of bird sounds, not a lot of wildlife. Lots of weird shit happening in general. Stuff going missing, stuff falling for no reason. At some point, my boyfriend at the time, back window was broken with no possible suspects. Our other friend swore on her life she saw a shadow man in the woods one night, and from then on out, needed to be walked to her car from the house. Anyway, no real big specific incidents, but enough accumulating things that we knew it was haunted. My old broke down car is there currently, because I had no place really to store it. So, in 2 weeks I get to go visit while I get my car towed. Maybe I'll have another bunny man experience. I had seen plenty of things before this, but this is what solidified it for me. I was 12 to 14, don't quote me on that. It was Christmas time and the whole family was at my grandparents' super rural Louisiana house, and I was staying in their fifth-wheel camper, since there wasn't any room in the house. It was about 2 to 3 a.m., and I heard their 2 Great Danes raising hell outside, so I looked out the camper window and saw them chasing a small black object darting back and forth, leaving these dogs in the dust. Out of nowhere, it darted 50 feet under a street lamp my grandfather put up next to his machine shop. Before I tell this next part, I need to preface this with, this may seem extremely fantastical, but I still get goose pimples retelling this story. Within a couple seconds, it went from being about 6 inches tall to well over 6 foot bipedal. It was perfectly under the street lamp, and I couldn't make out any real body features. It was like looking at a shadow. It didn't have a face, or didn't have one I could make out. It was terrifying. Then it got worse. It turned toward the dogs, who are still barking. It arched its back and screamed at the dogs, but it felt like it was coming from inside my head. The dogs ran, yelping to their doghouse. Then it turned to me. I was about 60 feet away from it, and even though I couldn't make out a face or eyes, I knew it was staring at me. It felt like someone had put ice in my veins. Then it ran and cleared the rest of the yard about 70 to 80 feet in less than a few seconds. I sat in the camper with every light on and a knife in my hand the rest of the night. The dogs didn't come out of their house for days after. When we would try and get them out, they would snap at us. Now I feel I need to say this, but I'm in no way a fearful person. I've had a knife held to my neck, I've been shot at, jumped, and beaten. I have never felt this level of fear again. I never feared that I was going to die more than I did in that moment. I grew up in those woods and have never seen anything like this before. I'm 27, and I've been afraid to go back into those woods ever since. I definitely don't leave the lit area around the house at night. TLDR. Saw shadows, escape creature at grandparents' house as a teenager and have been convinced there are things that live alongside us ever since. So, the dogs reacting, totally dig it. I think that they definitely can see things that we just don't perceive. And the fact that they were freaked out for days is pretty crazy. Maybe some type of weird animal? I don't know. What do you think? Phantom doorbells. Google that shit. It's no joke. It started when my then husband and I moved into our first apartment. It was frequent at first, then gradually tapered to every few months. After the divorce, it would start every few days, then taper off again. Kids and I moved into current apartment for a few years ago. It started again worse than ever. One night, I was sharing the bed with my little girl. Son was in our other bed across from us. I heard it again and laid still, heart racing, pretending I didn't hear it. Girl sits up super fast, body rigid, and calls out loudly, "Who is it?" without opening her eyes. Her brother answers, "There's nobody there, go back to sleep." She laid back down, never having woken up in the first place. A little late, but my family rented a cabin every summer. This year, it was a giant 4-bedroom one and was absolutely beautiful. My brother and I got the room to the right on the top of the stairs. Being kids, we explored the house with my cousins. There was a crawl space in the room we got, and the door was covered by a chair. We moved the chair and looked inside, and it was another decent-sized room, filled with really old, dusty boxes of files and a briefcase. No one went in because wimps. We just closed the door and replaced the chair. That night, my brother and I pushed the beds together because none of us wanted to sleep near the spidery window and fell asleep. I woke up in the middle of the night, and since I wear glasses, it was pretty blurry, but I noticed something out of the corner of my eye. There's a woman sitting in the chair just looking at us. I didn't feel threatened or scared. I remember just staring back and then turning around and falling asleep again. She was wearing a dress, but everything else was pretty blurry. When we woke up and started getting ready for the day, my brother mentioned if I had seen anything weird last night, and I didn't want to sound crazy, so I just said there were weird shadows that looked like a person. He asked if it looked like a woman, and I said yes. He asked if she was wearing a dress. Yes again. We just nodded at each other and didn't talk about it again until we got older. The place was creepy though. We found a locked room on the first floor later that day which had nailed windows and thick window coverings. Never rented it again, even though it was a great value and beautiful. This is a little different from everyone else's, but it's what makes me question what's possible. When I was about 13 or so, I got in trouble, as was the norm, and was made to pull weeds through my whole yard instead of being grounded. It was summer, so my mom was gone, and 5 minutes in I get bored and lay in the driveway. I'm stressing up about the clouds, and I can't remember what made me do it or think of it, but I started focusing on the clouds. I can't exactly remember how it happened or how I realized it, but I started thinking I could make the clouds disappear with my mind. I spent hours doing it. So eventually, being a kid, told some friends while we were swimming. Naturally, they didn't believe me and wanted to see. I told them to pick any cloud, although I advised not any huge ones, but big ones were good too. First cloud they picked, I made it disappear in a few minutes. They still doubted me, so they started picking clouds in certain context, clouds that were right next to ones of the same size, or clouds next to ones even smaller than it. Every time, every cloud they picked I would make disappear, and the ones adjacent to were unchanged. As far as we could tell, they were kind of shocked, and so was I, because I still doubted it, but less so after that day. I even made a video once on my ex's phone of me picking out clouds with one right next to it, bigger and smaller, to prove it to myself, and the cloud was gone in a minute or two. I rarely do it anymore, and I still feel like it's not possible, but my experiences tell me otherwise. The craziest thing was when I started looking it up and found cloud dispersing was actually a thing that people did as psychic exercises. Maybe I should keep it up, I don't know. I'd love to hear of anyone else who can do this. I'm an outdoorsman. I'm very experienced in hunting, camping, hiking, and general survival. I'm very familiar and used to the wildlife, and I was charged by what I believed was a cryptid called a dogman. It charged me and my cousin. It was not a bear. A bear cannot move how it did. And it was not a normal wolf, as they can't comfortably run on two legs, whereas what charged us seemed natural at doing it. I can elaborate further, if you wish. This happened around June or July of 2007, I believe. I was around 17 years old, and more cocky then, but still somewhat knowledgeable of the outdoors. My family used to own a cabin in northwest Wisconsin. I basically grew up there in the summer. I knew the woods well, but at night it was wise to stay in the cabin, or at least by the bonfire by the beach, because of bears, wolves, and cougars. One of the creepiest things was if you were having a bonfire, the tree line was visible from the fire pit and beach, and at night you always felt like you were being watched from that tree line. But during the day, the woods always seemed normal, not so creepy. That is, until this incident. So, this happened somewhere between 12 and 2. Me and my cousin were having an airsoft battle. I was in full woodland camo. He was not. I retreated onto the ATV trail into the woods for a tactical advantage, and our battle took us about 200 meters in to about a third of the way up the trail. We had enough at this point, and were standing at the edge of a clearing on the trail, talking, and he was maybe 10 feet from me. When I decided to mess with him, I shushed him and said, "We're being watched." He froze. Then I realized the woods were dead quiet, and I got spooked and started scanning the tree line and the other edge of the clearing from left to right when I saw it. Its teeth gave it away. It was panting and staring at my cousin. I don't expect you to believe me, but what I saw was a wolf as big as a black bear, at least 300 pounds, but it wasn't normal. This wolf was on two legs, crouching next to trees, with its arms grasping the tree, grasping with a clawed hand. It had reddish-brown fur. I told my cousin that we have to go, and the next thing I know, he's sprinting, and I look back at Wolfie, who had locked on and sprinted a few steps on 2 feet, and then I turned and ran when I looked like Wolfie was dropping to all fours. It charged us and sounded right on our asses, barreling through the brush, but for whatever reason, let us go when we broke out of the tree line and headed for the cabin. What stuck with me the most was the sheer size. Wolfie appeared to be nearly 7 feet tall when upright, and that where it should have had front paws, it appeared to have large clawed hands. Now, I'm not sure how to explain it away rationally. I have heard wolves will occasionally kind of walk upright, but as far as I know, they can't sprint on 2 legs, nor do wolves get that big, and black bears more waddle on 2 legs. The closest description is silly, a werewolf or dogman. Thank you for reading. Well, supernatural, maybe not, but cryptid, yeah. Any avid woodsmen out there? What do you think this might be? Interesting. I worked for my church for 2 years. One day a coworker and I were closing up the church at the end of the day. By this point, doors were locked and we had checked every room to make sure no one was in the building. The church had 2 lobbies, one in each side of the building. They were connected with a long hallway lined with classrooms. As my coworker and I were turning off lights and double-checking the doors in the one lobby, I looked down the hall and could distinctly see a boy, late teens to early 20s, in a plaid blue shirt, short-sleeve shirt, and khaki pants sitting in the chair. He had his hands folded and was looking at the ground as if in deep thought. Initially, I didn't think anything of it, as this wasn't an uncommon sight. I turned, and in the second it hit me that we were the only ones in the building. I turned again, and he was not there. From that time I saw him to when he disappeared all happened in about a second or two. I told my coworker what I saw, and we both noped out of there quick. Being that it was our first unexplainable, potentially supernatural experience, we were both pretty freaked out, but we never felt threatened, nor was the presence malicious in any degree.